I welcome you all to today's webinar. Today we have a webinar by one of my favorite speakers so far, Antara Bhargava. She's a user experience lead at Onething Design Studios. She is an arts and design professional with a bachelor's of design. And this particular degree was focused in visual communication and strategic branding. That's her forte as well. One of my favorite things is that she's a brilliant orator altogether, and which is evident in podcasts like Decoding Digital Transformation that was spearheaded by her, or the UX Laws Understanding. Besides that, Antara is having professionals. So sorry again about the technical glitches, but really excited, Antara. Over to you. I'll let you spearhead the conversation and take it forward from here.
Sure, no problem. I think more or less I understood majority of it. Thank you so much for the introduction. Let's take it from here. All right. Hi guys. Hello everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Some of you, I think, were part of the last masterclass, so welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the top UX UI roles, the different types, understanding the role, the requirements and the skills, and sort of deep diving into some of them. So just like last time, we're going to start with a meme because these titles are getting a little too complicated. From a designer to a UX architect to, I wouldn't be surprised if, 3 years down the line, we have a connoisseur of human empathy architecture. But the thing is that almost 90% of today's design job titles were actually created within the last 5 years. So there's a lot happening in this industry and a lot that we have to catch up with. Looking back in 2009, everyone was called a web designer. So UX design is in fact one of the most recognizable job titles right now in the UX field. It's so common that the entire field is again called UX design, which is misleading. That is not the case. If you were to go and pursue a degree in this, you would probably go and do a HCI course, which is a human-computer interaction. This is where we are now. So from UX designer to UX unicorn, titles keep on emerging. User experience design is actually in itself a very fluid and evolving industry, right? So the UX roles also vary with the organization. So if you were to work in a smaller organization, you would have a broader set of responsibilities where you would probably take care of something end to end. Whereas if you were in a larger organization, you would have more specialized roles, which could be like a UX researcher or a UX architect. So where does that leave the new designers and the newbies who aren't sure where they want to get in? The only thing to remember is that your job title does not matter early on. UX industry right now does not have standardized job titles. What has more weight is in fact your skill set and the list of skills that are listed down with the job requirement of the job title. I will be, of course, today walking you guys through those skills. But before we deep dive into that, I want to walk you guys through the process and the entire step A to step Z of the entire journey. So that what we can do is we can objectively look at these design roles and define them as much as possible. All right, so if you can see this here, this is the 5-phase process, which some of you might be sort of well-versed with, right? You might have seen it on case studies and documentations on Medium. We start with emphasize, where you learn your users' needs, you gather data, which goes on to defining what those problems are, what the needs are, how can we expand on them. We then ideate, where you generate design solutions to solve the particular problem, moving on to prototyping, where you create mockups and eventually, of course, the final product, and then moves over to testing, where you validate the results and you sort of go and check it out and how it's working. Now, this is not a linear process. It doesn't mean that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, sometimes when we test it out, we might feel like we've missed out some things, or we found maybe a change in the user behavior. So we go back to emphasize, and in fact, we add in that data and make it a very agile and iterative process. Now, as you can see here, the stages are very closely connected and they overlap a lot. And it's an iterative process by nature, which is why partly these job roles are so vaguely connected together, because it's hard to separate the entire process. It is one which has been split into specialized buckets. So let's start with decoding now some of them. The most basic ones, which of course now we are well versed with, are UX UI designers, experience designers, and interaction designers. Now these designers are generalists. That means they cover a little bit of everything in the entire process. As a UX designer, you will understand your users' needs, you will generate ideas to solve the problem, and you will prototype your designs and finally test them out, essentially participating in all of these 5 stages of design. And what changes now post this is specific sections and specific parts of the process that people want to specialize in or they're more interested at. So now say if you want to be a UX researcher or a UX analyst, let's start with the researcher first. If you remove ideate and prototype from this entire flow and keep empathize, design, and test, that's where a UX researcher comes in, who is more along the lines of a specialist. A UX researcher looks at qualitative and quantitative data and uses these research methods to sort of provide real user information. And he passes it on to the designer so they can inform their entire process. As a UX researcher, you will take part in the initial stages of design where you will empathize with the users to gain a holistic understanding of what their needs are, define what their problem points are, and promote it in the entire journey of product creation. Now, UX researchers, people have this misconception that it's only in the beginning that they sort of get in and then they get out, but they also have to test it out. So if they have to validate these use cases and go back to the drawing board and see if their hypothesis and their understanding is correct. UX analyst, on the other hand, is a more critical job where you're looking at metrics. So this is somebody who looks at data, who tries to analyze it, who tries to improve either the adoption or the conversion or the retention. There are 100 other metrics that we discussed in the last masterclass that I was there, right? So they look at all of these and they try and create a plan of sorts to be able to achieve a goal. And they determine the best way to create these realistic goals and to achieve them. So for them, it's very, very important to collaborate with the product managers, to collaborate with marketing, with customer, with sales, all of that to get the data that they have and to be able to come up with options to reach that particular goal. Now, if we remove the last 2 stages, that is prototyping and testing, and we keep the first 3, that's where a UX architect or an information architect, like you might have heard, come in. So what they do is that they ensure that the web or the app or whatever that they're designing is structured in a way that it makes it easy for the user to navigate throughout the entire process. So they're making sure that the user's journey is logical, it is seamless, it is easy, and they can reach towards their final goal as seamlessly as possible, right? So they also need to work with the UX researcher here. So if you look at this entire process, it's a very collaborative system where everybody specializes in one thing, but they work together. It's not one person can do everything. It's a team that comes together to form an entire product. And what they need to do is they need to understand through the UX researcher how they consume content and how they navigate content to be able to create a task flow analysis or to be able to understand the entire cross-section of the website or the application. All right, now this is a lot of people's favorite role, which comes to your prototyping stage. Now, this is where all of the things that determine the visual experience of a user, that is something that is developed, determined, decided, and created by the visual designer. So they focus on creating the identity, the direction, the screens, of course, the pixel perfect prototypes that are consistent across the entire product. In a sense, visual designers focus on the later phase of the design process, but ideally what happens is they should be right in from the beginning so they understand what the objectives are and they can align those with the visual components that they also create. Another very interesting job profile that lies within this specific prototyping stage are UX writers, also called content strategists, right? These are specialists who craft the right kind of copy for your product in the phases of the design thinking process. So there are lots and lots of roles. Almost towards the end now, say as a experience design lead, what I do is I am responsible to create the end-to-end journey, right from the very beginning to the very end, but also look at feature mapping, product strategy, product roadmap. Ideally, this kind of a persona in a smaller company or a startup would be called a product designer, where they are responsible not only for a specific experience, which is done in, say, phase 1, but also for a more zoomed out version of the product goals and roadmap. So a high level summary, essentially, of the future direction of where the product might go, what these offerings could be, what those features are. And in that kind of a setup, they're also responsible that whatever they do on plan to create sort of happens on time and is implemented well. So that's where product designers come. And these roles get a little blurred with different organizations, but this is to give you an idea of what it entails. And it can, of course, change with time also. Another very interesting, which is in fact a rare role, but now is sort of getting more prominent, is a UX unicorn or a UX engineer. So typically, these are also UX designers, but they're also proficient in design and front-end development. So here they take care of the end-to-end journey, but they also look at the front-end development and bring the entire product to life, which is why they're called a unicorn, because they can get everything done. Now that you have some clarity on the roles and responsibilities, let's get down to certain skills. There are 3 key areas, right? Whatever part of the process you're at, but you can bucket them into 3 categories. One is research, second is experience and interaction design, and the third is visual design. Research, like I said, is about understanding the people who will use the product, the needs of the business, and sort of aligning that with the processes and the systems also of the product. Your experience and interaction design is more integrated with research on people, on businesses, on processes, and lending that into the entire experience. So it's not just limited to what happens digitally, it's the end-to-end customer journey, whether it's offline, online, even if the fact that, say, right now we're designing a platform where we have to look at a lot of the interaction, in fact, happens offline. But how do we provide that and how do we showcase the status of that online is part of the experience. And then, of course, your visual design. Visual design is once the experience and the interactions are defined, visual design comes in, makes the product come to life. It's about what it looks like, what the direction is, what the identity is. Now, these are 3 buckets. What I will try and do is, not without getting into too much detail, because we'd like to take up a lot more questions today. I'll outline what are certain things that we should know if you're interested in research or if you're interested in the experience or the visual design. What are certain things that you, as a requirement, should have expertise in or be proficient in? So when it comes to research, ideally, you should be able to conduct stakeholder interviews, right? You should be able to look at quantitative and qualitative data, assemble it, understand it, analyze the findings from it, and then present the findings as actionable recommendation to the product teams, to the business teams, to the marketing teams. You should also be able to create customer journeys and personas and look at discussion and testing sprints that eventually, if you have to test out your, these recommendations, how would you do that? A lot of it also involves collaboration, and which is very, very important. So collaboration between your design and your product teams to ensure that the research is being interpreted correctly and utilized in the entire product development process. So that's majorly about research. Moving to experience and interaction. Now here you should ideally be able to identify and quantify all of the business-centric goals, your product-centric goals. You should be able to outline the experience through the user flows and feature mapping so that you can evaluate the entire product experience, brainstorm, and create either low or high or mid-fidelity wireframes based on what's a project or the phase of the project requires. And all of that only happens once you have a good knowledge of the design principles, of the visual principles and the best practice, which is why it becomes very, very important to really have a good foundation. Before you start building stuff, you should know a lot more. You should be able to understand how navigation works and what are the pros and cons of, say, having a sidebar versus, say, a general navigation, and why that works before you deep dive and start creating it for the first time. That's also creating prototypes for testing, presenting these designs to the clients, giving them the different kinds of directions and iterations, and be able to justify why have you taken this decision and on what research have you done it. This also requires a lot of collaboration with the research team, product, design, marketing, to name a few. And lastly, we have visual design. So here what you do is you develop a visual identity, you explore directions, you collaborate with engineers to ensure the visual design that you have created translates to the final experience. You translate the wireframes into interactions, create these interactive prototypes for testing while keeping in mind that there's a lot of research that has been done before, so you can't negate it, and how to integrate it into your design so that it becomes better and the product becomes much, much more intelligent. So creating design systems and guidelines is again one, and designing for responsiveness and accessibility. All right. The last bit, of course, everybody as designers generally tend to focus on and their energy on sort of mastering these tangible skills, right? Where it's not just about pushing pixels, but it's also about honing your soft skills. And they're not soft anymore, they're like extremely crucial. So one of the top things here becomes collaboration. So you will be collaborating with whatever role you are in. You will be collaborating with other teams on a regular basis. That means depending on where the project is, the phase of the project, or the degree wherever you've reached, you will be either collaborating with the leadership to define the business roles, or you will be collaborating with the developers to execute it and bring the entire project to completion. So it becomes very important then to work as a team and to be able to take and give feedback, because that's when the entire product and the iterative cycle comes to life. Second is communication, which I really stress on, because strong communication skills are not only important to get valuable feedback from the customers, but they're also equally important to create this enthusiasm within the stakeholders. So that when you do presenting a new idea or a new design or a completely different redesign or a revamp of the website, they understand what the reason behind it is and they want to look into it further. Third is presentation. Now, when you do present, you should be able to justify the work that you've done. You're making these drastic changes to design, whether it's a small button or it's an entire overhaul. We should be able to present our work very, very articulately and clearly, right? So to be able to practice that is very important. Do it as much as you can. And of course, you get a hang of it by the end of it. And adaptation. So what adaptation means is that it is vital that designers familiarize themselves with the technologies, with the trends, with the products that are out there, not only because of the fact that we'll go outdated if we do not really keep up, but also the product will not really show up or become its best possible version if you do not integrate newer technology into it and improve the overall experience. And the last part is empathy. Now, it's a word that has been used a lot, but it is extremely important as a UX, UI, researcher, architect, whatever you are in this experience design field. You should be able to fully understand the struggles and pain points of the user, to sort of put yourself in their shoes, observe them and understand them so that you can create solutions that actually matter, right? To be able to remove the obstacles and create a flow that is honestly enjoyable and seamless, more than just catering to the business goals of the entire thing. So that about sums it up, covers your job roles and requirements. I hope that helped. And I think we can start taking questions now. I'm going to start with questions because I think there's a little bit of an issue with network. So let's take up the first one. All right. Lakshay has said, I'm a law graduate, BA LLB, and I want to pursue UI UX. What will be my possibility of getting into this domain? Could I share my profile? Please do let me know how. All right. So the first thing I feel that is important is that for you to get into UI UX, you need a base level understanding, right? If you have no exposure altogether, start with as simple as looking at case studies on Medium. There will be a problem statement. They would have gone through the entire process. Read up as much as you can and try and get a portfolio together. So what you'll have to do is, once you get enough, say about 2 to 3 weeks of looking at different examples of people creating their case studies, you can actually start, pick up a design task. Maybe you take your favorite app and say, I want to redesign it, create a few screens and build a portfolio. Of course, taking up a lot of courses and classes, now there are hundreds of them, really help. They give you an end-to-end understanding. So maybe you can start with that also. But the idea with getting a job is that you need some sort of a portfolio, even if you're applying for an internship level. It can be 1 or 2 projects maximum, not more than that. Focus on that. Show the people that you can think critically, that you're able to solve problems, and that should be good enough. Second, from Shubham. I was working with a UX researcher who had to develop a prototype for a trading marketplace. He had no experience on how trading works. In such cases, how important is domain knowledge? For instance, if the UX researcher knew how trading works, it would have been easier for him. Definitely, it would have been much, much easier. But there's something called apprenticeship method. And I'll tell you how we did that. There was this one client called Gensol. which is this very elaborate solar power plant management dashboard that we had to create. Now, I had no idea whatsoever on what those metrics are. How does a solar dashboard even work? And it was a supremely complicated platform with analytics and management and operational. What we did to sort of get started with was that we got that domain knowledge. We might not have gotten, like, understood everything, but for the first 2 to 3 weeks, we just explored the platform, got walkthroughs, understood how the system works, read up about it. So domain knowledge is important when you start on a project, but it's impossible to get a domain knowledge of everything off, right? There will be newer clients, newer things happening, and it's completely okay to start to do a little bit at the beginning of the project. So say if you have a new client that you know it's going to get, the project is going to kick off in about 2 weeks, use those 2 weeks to really inform yourselves, bring yourself up to speed on what the best practices are, what the competitors are doing, how do their products look like, and that should help. Okay, next question. How to take a call regarding whether we really need to change the UI or not. Okay, so which is this actually is a big problem, and that happens in a lot of companies. What people do is they start with the UI design, they create it, and then they want to go to the client and then say, we need a sign off. That is not the right way. So the process of UI design is that once I'm done with the wireframing, and there are certain design principles that I set for it, I will also outline some visual principles. These are guiding principles. So say, for this one project, we looked at community building. We looked at minimal and easy and accessible. These were certain keywords that we picked. We tried to get the leadership aligned on it, that do we all resonate with these few principles that we want to build on. Once there is a groundwork set, then you start exploring mood boards. You create stylescapes, you show them version 1, 2, 3, you get that approved. Then you go back and move ahead and start creating the UI. And that also not the entire thing, but a few screens. So you're always checking, validating with the leadership. And also once you're at a decent stage, you can test it out with the customers. So you want to maybe go and share it across with a few colleagues of yours, or if you have a focus group that you've created, share it with them, get their inputs on what they feel works, doesn't work, how are they responding to it, and make changes. So the decisions that are taken are based on business objectives, and they're taking on user-specific goals. We as designers don't even come into this picture. All we have to do is we have to do a good job of designing it. But this goal and the set objectives are always defined. So it's factual rather than the fact that I can get biased by my own judgment that I like dark mode more than light mode. So that doesn't work. All right, next question. I'm a quality analyst. I want to switch to UX. What are my chances? So guys, let me tell you, this is for everybody. This field in general, if you want to make a switch to UX, there is nothing stopping you. I have known people, of course, who've done design and gotten in, who've done engineering, who've done law, like another example, somebody who was a psychologist and got in. So it is a very broad field. The field essentially is about problem solving, right? It's about knowing people. It's about solving a problem. It is about understanding, what the requirements are from a project. And of course, then the design skills come in later. So you can easily make that switch. You should learn more, read up more about it, attend a few courses. If you get that understanding, if you feel like you've got a knack for it, that means that you are enjoying the entire process of solving a problem and it not being solved and going back to the drawing board again. So it's your thing. Surya, I'm trying to move from graphic designing to UX UI designing. What things I should keep in mind to grow faster in this field? All right. So for those of you guys who do not know, I in fact did my graduation in visual communication and strategic branding. That is very close to graphic designing and branding and illustration. And it was only after a year that I made that switch, because that was when UX UI was sort of popping up. I'd heard about it. I had worked on a couple of websites and I found it very, very interesting. What the good thing about coming from a design background is that you already have a very good aesthetic sense, right? So it helps you in the UI design bit. You already know how things are fitting, how does layout work, hierarchy, color, composition, majority of the principles you're well aware of. So what you should keep in mind here is, now that you do have some baseline understanding of UI, you should understand the process of UX, right? Go look at research tools, understand how can you sort of pick up a problem, try and solve it, look at ideations, try out feature mapping. All of these things will really, really help hone your skills in critically thinking and not just visually thinking. So while you, as a graphic designer, you've got visual skills, you need to really work towards your research and your critical thinking skills. And there's always something that somebody needs to work on. So it's a good shift to make, and it's a relatively, I would say, an easy shift to make because you already know designing. What are the beginning steps in getting into UI UX design? Is the Coursera Google UI UX design professional certification be okay for the initial step? It is a course of series 7. So I think the Google UX UI, I'm not sure about the Coursera course, but there is a Google certification course also, which is really good. A lot of people who have joined the company recently have done that. I've never taken that up. I did my sort of certification from Georgia Tech, but I did a much more HCI-based curriculum, which they teach for their masters. But it is something that you do not need to, I would say, focus so much on the kind of course that you have as much as the exposure that you need to get around this particular field. So whether you take Coursera or you look at a couple of others, and I'm sure, I can always get back to you guys what the top ones are right now. I also have to do my own research. But look at the top ones where people have been giving good reviews, giving good feedback, and how is that helping them, and go for it. Go for something which is not... maybe take a shorter course first and then deep dive into a longer course so that you get an idea whether you even like this or not. Is it working out for you? So you do a quick 2-week sort of a certification online, and getting many certificates on a bad thing. So the more the merrier. It's completely okay. Okay, Ria Nagpal. If someone wants to shift from graphics to UI UX, what all should they keep in mind in terms of things to work on, ways to work on the portfolio, and finally, how to land opportunities? I think I've already answered this. You have a good understanding of graphics and UI. You should now start creating. So first and foremost, like I said, would be to really understand what is the width of research that is required. Because as graphic designers, we always like to work with stuff that is exciting and good to look at. But there's a lot of back-end work that goes into UI UX. For a good amount, I mean, probably months, you might not even see a visual screen because you're designing the wireframe and you're figuring out the flow and the functionality. So work towards that, figure out where your skill set is, and then start creating a few case studies of your own. The way to land a job opportunity is purely based on having a good portfolio. Once you do that, things will just automatically follow. All right. And we have Lakshya's question. As I had no degree in this relevant field, just doing courses and building portfolio would land me in good internship and jobs. I'm 26 already, and I recently made my mind for this domain. And I need clarification. A job position means one who got degree in design and gets certified in UI UX. And on the other hand, my profile with law background and done with certification portfolio. Please. I'm very confused. What are you trying to say? But I think what you mean here is that, on the job position. So let's start with this. Right now, so you're 26, and I do understand that, you want to get into something that you're 100% sure of, but this is a new field. Even if you join as a UX designer or a UI designer or a researcher, you can easily make that shift, but you have to get started. So try maybe starting with a broader sort of a role where you get to do everything, right from research till the end, your prototyping state, so that you understand where does your interest lie. And then if you want, you can always specialize. If you feel like I want to do everything, you can sort of, go towards that route also. So there are a lot of possibilities, but deciding before we get into the field is a little bit of a challenge because every organization, like I said, works very differently. So we'll have to go see the job requirement and see the listing and see what are they expecting. So a couple of places, they say that they want a UX designer, but sometimes the requirement is to actually also create UI screens, which ideally should not be the case, right? Or a UI designer is supposed to create that. End, I feel, and I honestly believe that, and I tell my team also, we should all just focus on being better product designers or experience designers, because you can become an expert in one, but you should know everything, right? Right from the starting to the end. And that's where growth also lies, for you to sort of upscale and become better and land a much more senior role. You need to be aware of all of these specific sections and not just one. Okay, from Tanishq. I'm working in customer service domain in US-based gaming company. So switching to UI UX designer would be a tough nut for me, but what should be my initial step? first step towards this would be probably you might have learned a lot in the gaming company. Could be, right? So try and see. All of us, at some point we feel that, oh, we're going to make this switch and we're starting right from zero, but we're really not. We have a lot of things that you guys have already learned. So say if I shifted from a strategic branding role, I got a lot of that learning and knowledge into my present role, where I feel like I'm able to do certain things much more easier and they come naturally to me only because I had a particular. So you want to be an expert, but you still want to be a T-shaped person, right? You want to have an understanding of everything. So first, I think understand what you would bring to the table. What are your strengths since you've been working already? Then identify, maybe do any one case study and identify what are the things that you really like or what do you think you feel that you have a knack for. Focus on that, build on it, create a portfolio, and then move ahead. It's a very standard process right now for UI UX. It's not that, of course, you can go into there are two ways to do it. One is to create a portfolio and start applying for jobs. The other is to get enrolled into a course and then get a placement right from the course itself. Build, and that portfolio happens right within the course. So these two versions, both of them are completely okay. See what works for you. If you want more guidance and you can completely go for the course. If you feel like I want to try it out first and then give it a shot, that also is completely okay. These are two. Oh, we've got more questions now. All right. Harshit, in B2B dashboard, data takes a lot of time to be shown since coming from multiple domains. How to solve this issue? Same at the time of report download, it takes a lot of time to combine and download reports, number and user in 1000 plus. All right, so this is a lot to do with, say, how much tech support you have. Now, what you can always do is, as a designer, suppose that you outline a way that I am going to create a structure in place. Say that even if you're talking about data on a dashboard, you want it to be as live as possible. You want it to be the turnaround time to be as little, downloading. But there are technical challenges to it. Suppose the technology might not allow for it. You can't do much. What you can do here is that you can provide this little bit of a status bar that says that it's going to take like another 2 to 3 minutes to do it and provide a really good interaction. So one is to be able to solve the problem technically. And that can be done with, if you have the resources and the tech support for it. But even if you cannot do that, you can provide affordance to the user to say that, yes, it is going to take so much time, but I'm being as transparent to and giving you the status check so that you're aware that this is, where we are and how much longer it's going to take. So keeping both those things in mind, I think we can create better experiences. Not everything is within our control. So there was this one, like the last bit that I showed you, right? For noise, the smartwatch that we designed, we wanted to go all out, but the budget was very limited. So the watch is being sold for about $2,500 right now, which is not enough to say that I want to have all of the fancy technology behind it. But how do we as designers bridge the gap? If the technology cannot be provided, can we do something on the forefront for the experience so that that little bit of the lag that is coming in, it doesn't feel so much, or the user is getting lost, that I'm not aware, or I don't know how much time it's going to take, and I'm sort of, trying to figure my way out on the website. That figuring your way out technically should never happen. They should always know what is happening at what point and what needs to happen next. All right. How much experience should a person must have to reach 30 to 35 lakh packets CTC in UX design? Okay. So I think from my experience, it really depends, guys. There are startups which have got insane amount of funding, which might just, if you've got a killer portfolio, might offer you that. Ideally, if you go to bigger companies, I would say for a package like that, you do still need to be at a senior role. You cannot be a junior designer, but it really depends on your portfolio and your expertise and how well you know the field. So money is not, I would say, the criteria. It's more about focusing on doing the best work, and money will follow. There's a lot of demand right now for this field anyway. Okay. Hi, I'm a graphic designer, but I don't have any degrees. Can I try to switch to UI UX? Yes, absolutely, you can. A lot of people I know who are excellent UX UI designers do not have a degree in UX UI. If you do not have any degree, I feel that certain companies might want you to have a bachelor degree, but that's really dependent on where you're looking to apply. So you can make that switch. Majority of these places do not have any criteria in place apart from the fact that you can design well and you can do a good job, and that should be it. Masters Union has a UI UX course. Is it online or offline? As on website, it is hybrid. And what will be the eligibility requirements for this? So I think I can direct this question to the Masters Union, but it is going to be, so we're One Thing Design and a couple of other people. So I think you met Venki and Manik. All of us will be taking a course, which is a 6-month long course, which will happen on weekends starting, I think, October. And that's going to be an end-to-end process, right? From research till the point of development and thinking about the possibilities that are there within UX UI, and also working on it in a hands-on manner where we actually create stuff and create a portfolio for you guys. So that will happen. And I think it is purely online. More specifics, you can get in touch with Masters Union. Kevin Hendricks, why does interaction design have so much demand and no supply of professions? What's your take? So Kevin, the thing is that right now, these roles, like I said, they're not very well defined. So at one place, you might be, if you go to LinkedIn and you sort of start looking at jobs and you type interaction designer, you might not get any. But if you change and you say UX designer, you might get a lot. So don't go based on the requirement, but actually go based on the details and the list of skills and job expectations that they've put on their listing page. Which is why I think this problem is. So a lot of people might be like, I want to be a UX architect, right? And they might not get a good listing for it. But then there are other positions like a UX designer where you will be doing the same job profile and a few more other tasks. So don't limit yourself by searching only by specific keywords. Try and go a little broader and look at each listing and read it and see if that aligns with the role that you want. Ma'am, do a master's in design help, or I should focus on skills related to UI UX design? I think a master's in design, it really depends on what kind of design, right? So UX UI in general, I would say, is of course a lot based on skills, but what a curriculum does it structures it for you. So where by yourself, you might feel a little lost that I don't know how to start. I don't know where to end. What is the in between? Can somebody give me assignments? Can somebody critique my work? So all of that, a curriculum helps you out with. So you don't necessarily have to go for a master's. You can also take up courses. You can do certifications. You can join the Masters Union class, more hands-on. It's really up to you, whatever you see fit. But you have to look at the degree, right? So a master's in design might also mean that it includes everything related to design. So it has graphic and communication design and visual design and a lot of other things. Whereas a master's in HCI might be something more specific, or a master's in interaction design might be more related to UI UX. So always look at the masters that you're going for, see if it gives you those the things that you need from the course, and see if it aligns with your financial motives, right? It really depends. I suppose you can take a 2-week or a shorter duration course and figure it out, and then see if you want to go for a master's, because master's is a longer investment. So think about it and then get into it, I would say. All right. And what are other design tools besides Figma you use, and would you like to suggest? I only use Figma, guys. I am very sad with this entire thing that has happened, and I don't know what's going to happen to Figma anymore. But Figma works beautifully for me only because they constantly update, upgrade, and their community feature is absolutely excellent. So I used to be on Sketch before. I think that's about 2 years or 3 years back. And I really liked Sketch too. But since I've made the move, I can't go back. So only Figma so far. But there are other things that you can explore. You have XD, now it's together. But there's Sketch, which are the two main competitors, I would say, right now. Okay, I think, have I answered all questions, guys? That's excellent. Okay, I think this is a good one. How to conduct qualitative surveys when it comes to a new product. And this is to understand what exactly the user wants versus what the business wants and how to align those goals. Okay, so the first thing would be go and have a proper stakeholder interview. where you will, and I don't know what the product is, so I'm just going to be very generic right now, ask them what their requirements from the product is. Like, what are the objectives? What are the metrics that they want to track? What does success mean to them? What is the brand's vision and mission? So those, try and outline. Don't have too many goals. Try and outline maybe 2 goals that the business wants. This is maybe they want to increase their revenue and they want to increase their engagement. Suppose that is it, right? And then you go and talk to the users. If it's an existing, it's a new product, then you understand. So let's just assume this product is maybe we're creating a product. It's a second-hand selling platform, right? So you go and talk to them and you want to create a platform, something like, say, ONX, but it's a competitor to ONX. So you will try and understand what their current behavior is like. So a qualitative survey gives you not numbers or quantifiable data, but it gives you what the user's behavior is like, what their needs are, what are the current platforms that they are using to sort of which match the goals of your platform that you're trying to design, what their pain points are, how are they with sort of technology, community building, what are their aspirations. So you get a rounded personality, right? And then you can try asking very specific questions. Suppose right now, if I go to a user and I'm designing a second-hand platform, I would probably go and ask them, right now, what are your inclinations, or what are the certain things that you consider when you are trying to sell your, say, TV or say your car, right, online? What are those certain things that you are important to you? And has it happened sometime that, when you try to make a sale, have there been frustrations? Have there been pain points? What are those? What can make your entire process much more easier? So there are certain things where you try and just gauge an idea of the persona and put them into buckets so that you can understand what the overall objective or the needs and wants of those target audience is. And that is what qualitative data is. So once you then have these two, you have your business goals and you have your user-centric goals, you can then align the two and see how can I match it. So suppose if these guys want to increase their engagement, can I provide maybe a feature that gives the ability to, maybe for a person who say buying something secondhand, they can create a watch list of sorts. They've been looking for it. They've not been able to find it, but there is a watch list that they create a requirement. They let the app or the website know that this is what they want. And then they get notified as and when there's a new listing. So that way we're sort of mixing these together and aligning them to come up with tangible features that might help the entire product. And the idea of all of this, the entire research in general, is to come up with actionable recommendations. That is all there is. You can do as much research as you want, but the idea is to, of course, set the foundation and come up with solutions that might solve the problem. Okay, hi. This is also, I think, quite a common question. I work for a corporate firm and the work that we do is mostly confidential. It becomes a problem in terms of switch. What can be done in that case? So what you can check is, you can see if there are certain aspects of the process that you can showcase. Maybe if you remove the names and you can show them a little bit of the research, if you try and eliminate certain specific features, show a bit of the wireframe. But if that is the case, try and have a little bit work that you've done on the side. So any hypothetical project that you worked on to show your expertise, right? To show that, yes, I have one project where you can see my skills and you can see the quality of work. And then I can maybe explain to you or maybe walk you through without sharing anything, over screen share a few elements of something that I've done for other projects. But you'll have to try and talk to them and see what the agreement is like so that you can share it. So this question is it mandatory to study both UX and UI for getting a job? It's not at all. You can do one and then learn the other on the job. It's really up to you. There are people now who specialize in only UX and only UI. So there is a lot of potential in this field to be able to find your niche here. How often do design trends change and how long do they last on average? You should keep yourself up to date on these things because there's no specific timeline per se, right? Certain trends have not changed over the years. How e-commerce platform works has been working sort of for a really long time with incremental change that is happening. Whereas maybe your entire fintech is getting revolutionized. So there's a lot happening, and the more that you expose yourself to, the more you'll understand. But as such, be constantly at it to know more and to see what is happening around you, and that should keep you up with the times. Ma'am, I have faced the interview. They like my travel screen designs where they asked for the front end. I did not understand this question, Jivan. Sorry. One funny question. What are your thoughts about Figma acquired by Adobe? I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I do not know what's going to happen now and if it's going to be the extremely loved product anymore or not, but we have to wait and see. They've been acquired at like, I read 50 times the price. So that's something. I'm sure they could say no to it. How to get ideas for mockups and how to get started in making it a professional way. So there are really good websites now, Anonymous Attendee. There is, your Behance, there is Dribble, which you can just look to get inspired. You have Awards as a website, which also has some really good mockups. But what I would recommend is that there are certain, if you just Google and you try and find out, I can't remember all of the names right now. It's been a while since I made mockups, but you can try and get them. And more than just, oh, you said mock projects. I'm so sorry. Mock projects. There is this website called IDEO. I think it gives you product problem statements. So you can actually just look at that and build on it. It's a great tool. Additionally, you can do redesigns of some apps that you feel like need an improvement. You can look at Medium case studies. There are lots there which might inspire you to create something of your own. And to do it in a professional way would be to be as thorough as possible. Don't rush the process. Take your time. It's probably the first time you're doing it. Starting from the first section, from defining the brief, learn everything about it. How do you define a brief? If you're doing a redesign, what are the 10 steps for redesign? What are the questions you need to ask for a redesign? Create like a structure in place and then take one step at a time. Hone that skill. When you're at the research phase, do it really well. Do it for like 2 weeks and then go on to say the wireframe and then go on to the UI. That way, that one project that you do will give you an enormous amount of learning rather than if you do it in the setup of a design sprint. What, according to me, is the most important step when it comes to problem solving and building a case study? So, building a case study is different because it's majorly a documentation. But problem solving, I would say, to solve a problem, like I said, research, of course, is very important. But a lot of times, you feel a little bit of referencing. So, what you should really do is that you should look at everything possible. So, suppose if you were to create tomorrow e-commerce platform for furniture and decor, the first thing would be to look at what is happening around you, to look at everything possible under the sun so that you have this complete wide database of knowledge and then you build from that. To be able to solve problems, first you need to see what is happening around you and then you also need to identify the problem, right? Like if you, a lot of times we get into trying to just create something and say that there is, we go into the solution aspect. But defining the problem is even more important. And the way to define a problem is not looking at it just objectively, but to also take a step back and see what is not working. And that happens through your research, qualitative, quantitative, looking at the current existing app and identifying core problem areas, not minor things. These are not fixes that you can make that you can, if you change the site to a minimal website, it's suddenly going to work. Or if you, move the navigation around, it's going to work. These are core foundational problems that you would like to solve. As a designer, what are the things that need to be taken care of during mobile app testing? There are a lot of tools now, Manoj Kumar. So, you can have a look at those, but keep in mind that testing should not always be that you've created something and you give it to the users to test. You have to form some sort of a script in your head. So there has to be test cases. That means that you're going to test out a particular flow. You see how much time they're spending on it. There's something called a task analysis, where you give the users a goal and you see the time that they take and their entire experience throughout. So a lot of these metrics, I won't get into any details, where you can actually identify these 5-6 points, create an entire script for you, and then go ahead and test for you to be able to get something tangible out of it. Because otherwise, if you just give it for testing and for user testing that way, you will not come up with substantial amount of data because people are very qualitative about the work that they say. But at the time of testing, we need something more substantial. We need to do it with enough people. And we also need to get deeper insights to be able to take the call whether we have to go back and change the design or not. how to do time management and devote time to design when there is a lot of collaboration happening with design teams, meetings, how one thing members handle multiple clients if someone is working multiple clients. Yeah, see, that's a thing which is another thing I was going to add in that presentation was prioritization and time management, extremely, extremely important. So right now, say for a senior designer, they would ideally have 2 to 3 projects running, mostly 2. For a junior designer, they would probably have 1. I'm giving you a very baseline understanding to help you understand how people sort of operate and what the roles require. But say right now, say for my role, if there are 7 projects or 7 clients and I have to be on every meeting, we have to schedule it in a way that I am also able to, as a designer, give my time, give the team my time to design, for feedback, for critiquing, for reviewing. And generally what that happens is we outline a flow to it. So say there are 3 weeks of research. So when there are 3 weeks of research happening, parallelly in the other project, there's something where we are at a stage of wireframing. In another project, we're at a stage of UI design, so that those teams don't mix and clash in a way that everything happens together. So it's incremental. And of course, as you progress, it becomes a little easier throughout the entire project. But it's really depends on how much you can take on your plate. Never overburden yourself with work, because then you will not be able to do a good job. Try and focus on as much as possible. Even right now, we would have, say, for me, I would have, say, 3 projects which would be critical, where there is daily collaboration, feedback, designing happening. And then there are 2 which are very slow paced, where the requirements are more once in 2 weeks. One more question. As we know what that design process, so as a UX UI designer, what should I do to increase my brand value? Do good work, yeah. Just do good work. You will automatically increase your brand value. Do good work, talk about the work in a good manner, present it well, be able to justify it, get your foundational knowledge, all of those things, and never copy designs ever. Big no. And there's a book called Steal Like an Artist. So, if you guys have gone through it, you will see that you can get inspired by anything. But to be copying something, it ruins your credibility, right? So if you've done it once, it's a bad thing anyway. But try and initially, when you start as a new designer and you want to learn, it is a good idea to copy, but not to post that stuff. So you're copying to learn, to understand how these experienced designers are actually creating those visual screens. And am I able to replicate or not? So even say as an artist, right? So when I was younger and I was learning how to draw, I would first copy say how we do still life also. We copy it first and then we transform it into something else. So the first step with copying is completely fine, but keep it to yourself. Don't copy on the later stages of creating a product for somebody else. For learning, it's completely fine, but otherwise it's not. So do good work, and that should help you with your brand value. And as a designer, I would say you're just constantly growing. So there is no going backwards. There's always going forwards. So all the work that you've done so far in life will always inform the work that you're going to do later on in life. All right. I think we covered majorly everything, Nija. I know also our time is up. So over to you.
Thank you so much. It's always a delight to hear you. And thanks for painstakingly covering all the questions, all the personalized doubts that students were having. Also, just to highlight the course that was spoken about in one of the doubts, as you were saying, that is your course. You are one of the masters in that particular course. I have shared the link, and I'm again sharing the link. So if anyone wants to know more about it, please feel free to take a tour of the website, and please feel free to reach out to connect to our admissions team as well for any help. And any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share before we leave, Antara?
I think we covered majorly everything, guys. It was really fun. I know I wanted this sort of session to be more question answer specific, because it's about jobs and finding a job and doing the right thing. So I hope that helps. And I'm really hoping to see most of you in the course that we're going to take. It's going to be super exciting. I know these are very short sessions where we're doing all this virtually. I can't get to see your faces. I'm just talking to Nirja throughout and addressing her with every answer that I sort of give out. But all right, we've got more. One thing is doing great. Yes, please, I would love for you guys to apply. If you guys want to apply, more than welcome. But see you guys, some of you in October, hopefully. Thank you so much, Nirja.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks so much, Antara. Thank you for the webinar. Really always a delight to watch you, hear you during the podcast or during the webinar. Thank you so much for your time.